That line has lived in my head for months now. At first, it was just a sentence, an observation about a stain on a shirt. But stains have a way of talking, don't they? They tell stories that words try to hide. It was a Tuesday, the kind of quiet weekday that carries its own small peace. I was folding laundry in the soft hum of the washing machine when I saw it. A faint, smudged mark on the inside of Daniel's white dress shirt collar. Deep crimson. I blinked, leaned closer. My lipstick is coral, soft, warm, almost orange in certain light. That shade though, it was deeper. Red wine deep. The clock ticked somewhere behind me, the minute hand dragging across the face like it was holding its breath, waiting on me to understand what I was seeing. The smell of detergent filled the air, lavender and lemon, as I rubbed at that mark with my thumb. It didn't fade. And right then something in my chest twisted. Not because I knew, but because I didn't want to know. Before that day our life looked normal, peaceful, even charmed in its ordinary way. Daniel and I had been married 8 years. We had our small 2-bedroom home just outside Raleigh, the kind with a backyard big enough for weekend barbecues but small enough to mow in under an hour. He worked in marketing, always in button-ups and polished shoes. I ran a small home baking business, custom cakes, mostly anniversaries and birthdays. The kitchen perpetually smelled of vanilla extract and brown sugar. Every morning he'd leave with a kiss on my forehead, coffee cup in one hand, car keys in the other, and say, "Don't wait up. Late client meeting tonight." It was such a familiar phrase that it lost all texture, like background music in a grocery store. You hear it but you stop listening. We didn't have kids yet. Not for lack of wanting. I had simply told myself maybe next year. Maybe when the business grows. Maybe when we go on that trip we keep postponing. There was always something else before us. My closest friend, Marissa, was the kind of woman who filled up every room she entered. We'd grown up together. She wore bold lipstick colors and perfume that made people turn around. She'd stop by on Wednesdays sometimes, dropping off iced coffee for me, laughing about her latest dating disaster. Daniel used to tease her, "One day, Marissa, someone is going to match your energy and regret it halfway through dinner." We'd all laugh. There's something cruel about hindsight, the way it sharpens ordinary moments until they cut. That night I placed Daniel's shirt apart from the others. For a while I just stared at it draped over the laundry basket, that collar accusing me with its little red smear. I told myself it was probably something innocent. A coworker's hug, maybe. A smudge from a napkin. Something trivial. When he came home I watched him in the mirror as he loosened his tie. "How was your day?" he asked, voice neutral, eyes glued to his phone. "Fine," I said. "Baked 3 cakes. You?" "Meetings on meetings. I'm dead." He smiled then, brief and automatic, placing his phone face down on the counter. The color of that smudge flashed in my mind again. That deep crimson. Marissa had posted a photo just 2 days earlier on Instagram, showing off a new limited edition lipstick. "Finally found it in Carmine number 47, she captioned it. I'd commented, "Gorgeous," at the time. I even remembered the exact hue because I had thought too bold for me. As he leaned down to kiss me goodnight, the faint scent of her perfume drifted across his collar. Floral with too much vanilla, the kind Marissa wore. Sometimes knowing begins like an itch under the skin. Small, unprovable, maddening. Over the next week I kept noticing small things. Missing receipts, shorter hugs, less laughter. Daniel started keeping his phone face down all the time. At dinner he scrolled endlessly, claiming work emergencies. I tried to ignore it. Love, or what we think is love, can make us very good at pretending. But denial is heavy work. On Thursday when I went through the laundry again, I noticed that same shirt folded neatly on his side of the closet, freshly dry cleaned, except I hadn't taken it in. "Hey," I asked casually that evening, "did you stop by the dry cleaner this week?" He looked up from his phone. "Yeah, Monday, why?" I nodded. "Just wondered. I usually do that." He smiled thinly. "Trying to share the chores, babe." I mirrored his smile, but inside my stomach twisted. Daniel had never voluntarily run an errand that didn't involve his car. When he left the next morning I took the crumpled dry cleaning tag from the bottom of the hamper. The address wasn't our usual place. It was across town near Marissa's apartment. My hands felt icy and hot at the same time. The kettle whistled behind me. I hadn't even realized I turned it on. That weekend I drove to that boutique where Marissa bought her infamous lipstick. The display shelf was bare, sold out, the clerk said. But when I asked if they'd had any recent repeat customers, she absent-mindedly mentioned, "Oh yes, a gentleman picked up one last Thursday, gift-wrapped. He happened to leave his card on the counter." She smiled. Daniel Carter. I rang him up myself. I remember feeling both numb and absurd, like I was caught inside a play waiting for a curtain that never fell. I went home, sat at the kitchen table and looked around at the life I'd built. Everything suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. The mugs, the curtains, even the small plant by the window that he'd insisted on watering. Later that evening I laid next to him in bed, his back turned toward me, the steady rhythm of his breathing loud in the silence. The lipstick mark replayed in my mind with each exhale. There was no way to unsee it now. I didn't confront him immediately. Maybe because a part of me still hoped there was another explanation. Maybe because I needed to know why before I knew how I'd survive it. So I watched. Quietly. Like someone observing a ghost of her own marriage. When Sunday rolled around, he announced he'd be working late again. I simply nodded, then took my phone and dialed Marissa. "Want to come over Tuesday night?" I asked. "Sure," she said, bright as ever. "Dinner?" "Yes," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. "Just the three of us. I miss you both." Her pause on the other end was small, barely audible, but it was there. A vacuum in her laugh before she said, "Of course." That was all the confirmation I needed. That night, I pulled out a small folder and began to gather everything. The laundry tag, the receipt from the boutique the clerk printed for me, a copy of the dry cleaning transaction from the card statement I'd found on our shared account. Proof doesn't ease heartbreak, but it gives structure to your anger. And structure is a mercy. Tuesday arrived like a whisper that turned into a storm. I set the dining table early. 3 plates, forks aligned, linen napkins folded the way my mother used to do for Sunday dinners. I cooked Daniel's favorite dish, lemon chicken with rosemary potatoes. Old habit. Maybe, in some backward way, I wanted everything to look beautiful before I shattered it. Marissa texted around 6. "Running late, traffic's awful." I stared at that message for a full minute, reading between every line. Daniel came home just as I was setting the casserole on the table. "Wow, smells amazing," he said, kissing my cheek like nothing had ever happened. His lips brushed my skin lightly, practiced as if they'd rehearsed sincerity. I smiled, too calm for my own liking. "I invited Marissa," I said. He froze for half a heartbeat. "Barely noticeable if you weren't looking for it." "But I was." "Oh," he said, dropping his briefcase by the couch. "Nice. Haven't seen her in a while." "Exactly," I said softly, turning toward the oven to hide the tremor in my mouth. For a moment, our kitchen hummed with silence and the faint tick of the wall clock. 8 years of marriage condensed into awkward air and unspoken tension. When Marissa finally arrived, she caught me in the doorway with that same dazzling smile. White teeth, perfect eyeliner, cherry red lips. Not the same color as the stain, but close enough to sting. "Smells heavenly as always," she said, stepping inside with a bottle of Cabernet. Her hand brushed my arm, feather light, too familiar for a guilty person and yet too tense for an innocent one. Daniel greeted her, overly casual, his laugh just half a tone too high. "You made it." I watched them hug, polite, short, but his hand lingered a second longer on her back. I knew that touch intimately. Dinner began like any ordinary evening among friends. The scraping of forks, small talk about work and weather. I listened more than I spoke, my pulse matching the low rhythm of the jazz playlist Daniel had turned on. They avoided eye contact too carefully. "So," I said finally, pouring more wine into their glasses, "how have the two of you been?" Marissa blinked. "The two of us?" "Yes," I said, smiling faintly. "You both seem to have such busy schedules lately. I can barely keep track of who's meeting whom." Daniel chuckled, pretending to misunderstand. "She's just teasing," he told Marissa. But there was sweat gathering near his temple. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Actually," I said, voice steady, there's something I've been meaning to ask. Both looked at me. I placed a dry cleaning slip on the table, face up. This isn't our usual cleaner. Funny thing, I found it in your laundry last week, Daniel. Silence. The kind that fills every corner until even the air feels heavy. Then one by one I laid down the other items. The lipstick receipt from the boutique. A printed bank statement with the charge on his card. A picture of Marissa's Instagram post, the caption showing Carmine number 47. Marissa's hand twitched. Daniel's jaw flexed. I didn't plan to embarrass you, I said quietly. I just needed the truth before deciding what comes next. The confession didn't come dramatically. There were no tears at first, just the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Daniel spoke first, voice cracking around the edges. It was a mistake. It wasn't supposed to happen. Marissa stared at her wine glass like it might save her. I didn't mean to, Hannah, you have to understand. I held up a hand. Don't say my name like you still get to. Something in me had gone still. That strange clarity that comes when pain peaks and then flattens into numb acceptance. How long? I asked. 2 months, Daniel finally said, eyes glistening. It was only physical at first. She was going through a breakup. I was bored. I finished for him. Curious. He flinched, then shook his head. Lonely. You've been so busy with the bakery, The excuses dissolved under my stare. I thought about every night I'd stayed up decorating cakes, saving invoices, dreaming of a small expansion we could build together. For him, that dedication had translated into distance. For me, it was love made visible. I turned to Marissa. You said once you'd never hurt me. Do you remember? Her eyes filled with tears. I do, and I hate myself for this. I tried to stop it, Hannah, I swear. But you didn't, I said, my voice finally breaking. You wore the lipstick. You took my husband to places where we used to go. You smiled at me knowing his collar still had your perfume on it. She covered her face with her hands then, sobbing quietly. I almost pitied her. Almost. Daniel reached across the table, fingers trembling. Please, he said, don't let this wreck everything. I'll cut contact with her. We can fix this. That's when I laughed. Softly, but it startled even me. Fix this, I said. Do you fix a broken vase by gluing back every shard knowing it will always leak? You call that fixed? His eyes darted everywhere but mine. I think we're done, I whispered. I stood, gathered the papers neatly and moved toward the doorway. You can both leave now. I'll have the locks changed in the morning. Marissa started to speak, but I cut her off with a small shake of my head. I don't need apologies tonight. I just need space that doesn't smell like lies. They left together, silent, guilty silhouettes against the porch light. I closed the door and pressed my back to it, breathing in the ache that filled my chest. One evening after closing up shop, I took a long walk through downtown. The air smelled like summer rain and new beginnings. Passing a storefront, my reflection caught me off guard. Hair pinned loosely, flour streaked on my sleeve, eyes somehow steadier. I thought about how I used to measure security by who stood beside me at dinner. Now I measured it by how still my heart felt when I stood alone. When I got home, I poured a cup of tea and opened my journal, something I'd abandoned years ago. On the first blank page I wrote, he betrayed me, but I chose peace over proof. I found lipstick on my husband's collar, but it wasn't my color, and that's the grace of it. I'm not that shade anymore. For the first time in months, I smiled without effort. A month later, I received an envelope, divorce papers filed swiftly with minimal dispute. Daniel didn't contest. He left me the house, the car, and a single line in his letter. I lost more than I realized, and maybe that's the lesson you were meant to teach me. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into the back of my drawer, not to revisit it, but as a quiet boundary marker. The past behind one side, the future waiting beyond the other. The following Sunday morning was warm, sunlight making ribbons across the kitchen floor. I brewed 1 cup of coffee this time, sat by the window and looked out at those wilted tomato plants. New shoots had started to appear, tiny, defiant, green. I smiled. Healing has a way of sneaking up like that. The paper signing was quiet. No shouting, no courtroom theatrics. Just two people sitting at opposite ends of a polished table, a legal assistant sliding pages forward with clinical cheerfulness. Each page we signed felt like another plank snapping off the bridge between us. Daniel looked worn, stubble unshaven, tie askew. I almost didn't recognize the man who used to take so much pride in perfect lines and pressed collars. He tried smiling once, small and crooked. "You look well," he said. "I am," I answered. It was the truest thing I'd said in a long time. When we rose, he hovered a moment as if he might reach for my hand. He didn't. He just whispered, "I hope you're happy, Hannah." "I hope you learn," I said. Then we both walked out through separate doors. After the divorce became official, the story started leaking in ways I could never have predicted. Small-town silence can hold secrets for years, but once it cracks, the whole street hums. Customers at the bakery murmured, "Did you hear about Daniel and Marissa?" People asked tentative questions, eyes filled with a blend of pity and fascination. I stayed polite, never confirming, never correcting. Dignity, I found, has its own gravity. People eventually orbit around it in respect. One afternoon, I was frosting a cake shaped like a violin when a soft knock came at the glass door even though the sign read closed. Marissa stood outside. Her lipstick, paler now, almost colorless, was the only trace of the woman I'd known. I opened the door but stayed leaning against the frame. "I wanted to apologize in person," she said once she stepped inside. Her voice was hoarse. "I've lost so much, Hannah. The boutique fired me. People stopped asking for me at events. Even my family barely looks me in the eye." I folded my arms, feeling both angry and strangely unsurprised. That's what truth does when it finally speaks. It rewrites alliances. She nodded, swallowing. "Daniel and we didn't work out. Too much guilt between us." I didn't gloat. I just studied her trembling hands resting on the counter. "You'll find a way to rebuild," I said at last. "We both will. Just don't crawl through other people's homes to do it next time." A tear slid down her cheek. "You were always kinder than me." "No," I said softly. "Just more tired." She left a moment later, shoulders rounded, a shadow walking away from a mirror. I watched until she disappeared into the sun glare beyond the street. That encounter spread faster than anything else. Someone must have seen us talking. Within a week, half the town knew Marissa had come to beg forgiveness and that I had handled it gracefully. The bakery's orders doubled. People started calling me that strong woman as if heartbreak were a brand. It was strange, living inside my own little morality tale. But amid the attention, something gentler grew. Other women started confiding in me. Clients would wait until I boxed their cupcakes, then whisper, "My husband's been distant too," or, "I saw texts on his phone. How did you stay so calm?" I never offered them vengeance. I offered perspective. "Calm doesn't mean unharmed," I'd say. "It means I decided not to bleed where everyone could stare." Those small exchanges stitched new meaning into my days. Out of betrayal came community. Then there was Daniel. He called once, a month after our divorce finalized. It was near dusk. I was watering the garden. The ringtone startled me, that familiar number flashing like an echo from another life. "Hey," I answered cautiously. "I'm not asking to come back," he said quickly. "I just wanted to tell you that the company let me go. Word got around, it's been rough." I could hear the defeat heavy in his voice. For a moment I wanted to comfort him. Old habits die stubbornly. But the memory of lavender detergent and crimson stain rose again like a ghost between us. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I told him. "But pain is sometimes the only teacher that stays until the lesson sticks." He was quiet. "You sound so calm. Don't you ever get angry?" "I spent too long being angry," I said. "Now I'm just free." He exhaled a shaky laugh. "You always were stronger than me." "That was never the competition," I replied. When we hung up, I felt a small, sad relief. Not victory, just confirmation that the story's final chapter had truly been written. By late autumn, life found a new rhythm. The mornings began with flower dust motes swirling through golden light, Nina Simone humming from a Bluetooth speaker, and me humming along, off-key but content. My circle of friends widened. Colleagues from the market, a few divorced women who'd turned shared pain into humor. We called ourselves the Reset Club. One evening after closing up, I wandered into the little clothing boutique 2 doors down. The young cashier greeted me kindly. She was wearing a lipstick almost the same shade as that fateful carmine number 47. For a second I froze. Then I smiled. "Nice color," I said and meant it. The ghost finally stopped haunting me. The following month, a local lifestyle magazine asked to feature the bakery and its resilient owner. The interview touched lightly, almost tastefully, on personal transitions. When the article went online, the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in. Women thanking me for honesty, men admitting they'd reevaluated small daily neglects after reading it. It wasn't fame. It was something cleaner. The sense that my story had become a caution and a comfort at once. Still, some nights the loneliness crept back. Healing isn't a straight climb, it's a waltz of forward and backward steps. On those evenings I'd stand on the porch with a mug of tea, inhale the night air and tell myself aloud, "You're allowed to miss what broke you. Just don't invite it back to build again." Winter arrived with gentle snow, settling white over everything, covering even the garden like forgiveness. I spent Christmas Eve alone but not lonely, classical music playing, oven warm, one candle lit. I made myself a small cake topped with sugared cranberries and toasted almonds. When I sliced into it, I whispered a quiet toast. To peace. To truth. To never mistaking someone else's color for my own again. And maybe to new beginnings I couldn't yet see, because somewhere deep inside, the space once filled with heartbreak now pulsed with quiet curiosity. By the time spring rolled in, the bakery smelled less like survival and more like passion again. I expanded my menu, painted the walls a soft sage, and opened the windows each morning so the breeze carried cinnamon into the street. Neighbors said they could smell happiness returning. I liked that idea, joy having its own aroma. Healing didn't arrive one morning neatly wrapped. It seeped in through ordinary moments, through quiet breakfast tea, fresh daisies on the window ledge, the laughter of customers who never knew how shattered I had been. When people ask now what finally helped, I tell them, routine, sunlight, and forgiving myself for not seeing sooner. I stopped turning every red thing into suspicion. Lipstick became lipstick again, no longer a threat. I let color back into my life. There was one morning early that May when I caught myself humming in the kitchen. I hadn't realized I was doing it until flour dust shimmered in the light and the tune drifted out the door. A delivery driver waiting outside smiled. "Sounds like a good day," he said. "It is," I answered. "It really is." Later, while shelving bread, I caught sight of my reflection in the oven glass. My hair was a little messy, cheeks flushed from heat, eyes bright and steady. I looked for the first time like someone who belonged wholly to herself. Midsummer brought a new partnership opportunity. Another local baker, Maya, wanted to merge our shops for catering weddings and large events. When she mentioned the idea, my pulse stuttered. Weddings. The very thing that had once defined my grief. But as she kept talking, about opportunity, community, creativity, I realized this wasn't reopening an old wound. It was rewriting what love could build, one cake at a time. "Yes," I said simply. "Let's do it." That collaboration thrived faster than either of us expected. We catered our first wedding in June, a garden ceremony thick with roses and laughter. As I set up the cake table, I watched the couple share their vows and felt no bitterness, only warmth. Marriage, I realized, wasn't the villain, neglect was. After the reception, the bride came to thank me, gushing about the cake. When she left, her lipstick print stayed faintly on my cheek. A bright coral, almost the same shade I used to wear. I smiled at the symmetry of it, that color finally touching me again in kindness. One evening, while closing up shop, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was Daniel's sister, Ruth. We'd lost touch during the divorce, no bitterness, just distance. "I heard about the bakery expansion," she said warmly. "Heard you're doing incredible. Hannah, I stumbled on something I thought you might want." She explained she'd been cleaning Daniel's old office file boxes and found a sealed envelope with my name scribbled on it. "He asked me to deliver it someday, When it felt right, she said. I hesitated, then agreed to meet. When she arrived, she handed me the envelope and left me alone at the table to open it. Inside was a short letter, quietly apologetic. Hannah, I never understood how loyalty works until I saw what my disloyalty cost. You were the only calm place in my frantic life, and I mistook that peace for absence. Thank you for teaching me what real grace looks like. Asterisk. I folded it carefully and sighed. Not sadness, not joy, just acknowledgement. Closure sometimes wears the face of humility. I placed the letter in a shoebox with other keepsakes labeled lessons, not memories. By late autumn, my life had grown wide again. Friends, small travels, laughter that came easily. Marissa found work in another state. She sent one postcard in winter. I'm trying to be better. No return address. I hoped she meant it. And Daniel? Word trickled through mutual acquaintances that he had moved abroad for a marketing role. He looks different, one old colleague said. Quieter. Good, I thought. Quieter can be the start of understanding. The day I signed the lease on a second bakery location, my mother called. Sweetheart, she said, I'm proud of you. You turned pain into purpose. I laughed softly. You always said heartbreak is a teacher. Yes, she replied, but few students pass the class this gracefully. Her words stayed with me all evening. I took a slow walk through the neighborhood afterward. The air crisp, sky streaked with violet. Passing by couples clutching hands didn't sting anymore. It simply looked human. At a small park bench, I sat down and whispered to no one in particular, "You did survive." That night, I returned home and wrote another journal entry, the same way this story began months earlier. I found lipstick on my husband's collar once, and it ended a chapter one thought would last forever. But it also began the truer story of me, the one where fidelity isn't something I beg for, it's something I give myself. I paused, then added, peace isn't the absence of hurt. It's the confidence you can walk through it and still bake something sweet at the end of the day. Months later, the shop's grand reopening drew a full crowd. Near the counter hung a framed photograph of a single white shirt collar smeared with coral lipstick. Not crimson, not accusation anymore. Just a reminder of what begins when something else ends. Underneath, a handwritten quote. What stains can mark you, but they can also reveal where the fabric is strong. Customers noticed it, sometimes silently nodding. I still have quiet nights where I catch the scent of lavender detergent and feel the smallest pang, like the echo of an old bruise. But that's how memory works. It heals by reminding you just enough to keep you honest, never enough to keep you stuck. So now, when new clients arrive and chatter about love, commitment, trust, I simply smile and say, may your days be sweeter than your doubts. And I mean it. Because I've tasted both. When I look back now, I realize that story started with a stain but ended with a lesson written in light. What began as suspicion turned into strength. And maybe that's how life works. Pain introduces us to ourselves, one difficult revelation at a time. I used to think betrayal stole years from me. Now I see it gave them back. It forced me to notice the smallest mercies. A quiet morning, clean sheets, the way music sounds when you know nobody's lying to you anymore. It taught me that forgiveness is not permission. It's freedom. If you've ever faced a truth like the one that lived on that white collar, hear this. Your worth is not attached to someone else's inability to be honest. You can start again without asking for anyone's permission. Healing never looks heroic while you're in it. Looks like paying bills, washing dishes, remembering to eat, creating something small and good every day until peace feels natural again. And one day you'll look in the mirror and realize the reflection isn't broken. It's simply yours. Whole, steady, and lit from the inside. So to anyone listening tonight, if you find yourself standing over a shirt, a text, a secret, whatever form your evidence takes, remember, truth might hurt, but it never rots. It sets the table for your next beginning. Now, dear friends, tell me, have you ever discovered a small detail that changed everything? Share your thoughts with me below. Your stories remind us that courage doesn't always shout. It often whispers, I'll try again tomorrow. If my journey spoke to something inside you, consider subscribing, sharing, or simply passing this story along to someone who needs a bit of calm strength tonight. Until next time, be gentle with your heart.